Hi, everybody. You have got Diane, Annie, Mathias from beautiful Palm Desert, USA, and myself, Jacqueline Best from Prince Edward Island, Canada. And we are talking to you today about the creative breath. And today's topic that Annie's going to share is just awesome. It's art as the outer expression of your inner being. And this one is so relevant because we're all artists, whether we want to consciously acknowledge, but we're creating our world and we do it in so many faceted ways. So I'm loving this conversation even before it's begun. So open up, and we'd love to hear your comments and questions as we go along and your feedback. How are you, Annie?
I'm great. I really love this subject too, because, as an artist, there is so much that we can give to the world and receive back from the world. And I say as an artist, meaning I really believe too, we are all artists. If you've ever sat down with a child who had crayons in front of them and they began to draw, oh my gosh, the wonder of it is just absolutely incredible. And I think that, as with many things along the way, we somehow begin to think that art has to look like a photograph of something, or it has to be filled in these little lines. And so many people become afraid, or they say, oh, I can't do that. Or they have, they've been told, oh, you're not artistic or you're not creative. And they believe that because it was told to them by adults. And most of us grew up to know that when adults say something, we're supposed to understand and believe them. And so to go back and recapture that artistic part of us is like going back to recapture a beautiful dream, or going back to recreate something that we were meant to walk in. And I have a cousin who is a fantastic watercolor. Oh, he just does the most incredible watercolor, and he's world renowned, and his work is absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. And I say artist with great honor to those who have studied the beautiful work of art, and also those who are artists of the heart. And so that includes all of us. And I say that with great respect to all. Art is we have been given eyes, we have been given hands, we have been given ears, we have been given mouths, we have been given, all these wonderful senses, and art captures those and allows us to enter into a world of magical remembrance and expression that goes beyond our words. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm just kind of, spilling out here, but I think that the expression of art is so, so wonderful. It's taking something which is so profound and putting it into a form that affects us, not necessarily with our head, but with our heart. I will always remember an art show in La Quinta, California, where I came around a corner, and there in front of me was this incredibly huge acrylic painting. It was color. It was magnificent. I turned, faced it, and began to weep. That was my expression. I had no warning. I was not planning on going, looking at a piece and weeping, but that was my expression. And if I had had the money, I would have bought it right there on the spot. But of course, it was thousands and thousands of dollars, which I did not have. But one thing about art, we can always take it and put it in our hearts and capture that experience. And, just one thing I wanted to say too was, when I taught at a cancer center, and I also taught the bereaved, and I taught art classes, I'd put all sorts of art supplies out on the table, and we would do different types of wonderful mergings with these materials. And people would say to me, I'm not feeling very happy today. I don't think I should be doing any art. And I would tell them repeatedly, over and over again, art is not always bouquets of flowers and beautiful sunsets. Right. Art can be whatever is going on in your heart, whatever is the expression of your inward being. And I would say, please put that on paper, put that down in a way that you're able to express it. And what would happen is they would begin to express that, and having a voice for that which was going on inside of them is an incredibly healing force, because afterwards we'd go around and we would have a savoring time where everyone would have a chance to show their piece and talk about it. And oftentimes what would happen, which I just so truly love, because this happens to me a lot, is somebody would hold up a piece that they did and they said, I didn't really know what I was creating when I made this, but as I look at it now, I know what it is. And they begin to talk with great understanding about what was going on inside of themselves. And as they began to explain, they not only had a greater understanding of themselves, but the people around in the entire room, and usually there'd be maybe 15 people, they would also have an understanding, and many of them could absolutely relate to that. So that's kind of what I mean when I say our outer expression is an inward, our outer art is an inward expression of what's going on, because oftentimes when we do art, we may not have a penciled out drawing of exactly what we're going to paint or draw or create. We may, but sometimes if we don't, it's amazing what will fill that art space.
Yeah, and I just like the light bulb went off because you hear so much about people saying journal, right? If you need to release things, write it out and journal. And it makes perfect sense when you're saying allow the creativity how it's to come out. And I also think of, you know, the rappers when they first came along, right? And you know, people were saying, "Hey, that's not what you're talking about isn't great," but that was their release. That was their outlet. That was their healing to be able to create that way. And there's just a whole new energy here when you think about that. Like it would be so much more fun to mold and create and draw what you're feeling versus just having a pen and a paper and saying journal, because some people never have taken to the written word, right? And just, it's very, in one sense, one dimensional that you're just going to write to paper. But if you can allow yourself to express in color or texture, you know, or in different mediums, that can be so much more healing. I can see that.
Yeah. You know, sometimes I would say to people who I was teaching or working with, I would say, "What color are you today?" And they'd look at me like, "What?" And I'd say, "What color are you today?" And sometimes they'd say, "I'm kind of brown." Some people would say, "Oh, I'm kind of green, I'm kind of blue, I'm kind of purple. Maybe I'm a mishmash of a bunch of colors." I'd say, "Well, let's draw that." And as people began to draw the colors that they felt, then sometimes they would maybe write words on the side, maybe they would draw little pictures, but it's amazing when we begin to relate to ourselves in a non-verbal way. We start to think about, you know, what fragrance would I be today? Or, you know, what food do I taste like today? And we begin to think of ourselves in other ways besides just these linear words. And it's amazing how that can help us express really what's going on, who we are. It also opens all sorts of doors to, you know, because sometimes there's things that are just below the surface in us that we're not really looking at because we're not looking at them. We're not really paying attention. And so if I start thinking about what colors I am, well, maybe there's a tinge of kind of a yellowish color. You know, I'm kind of excited about this new project, but I forgot that was kind of a possibility. And then it begins to surface. And then parts of us begin to rise up that we had kind of shushed down. And it's a wonderful, color can be a wonderful process. So can, you know, trying to think what fragrance, if I was to look at this piece of work, what fragrance would I smell when I look at it?
Yeah, so what color are you? What fragrance are you? And what food?
Mm-hmm. Or what sound?
What sound, right? Like those are very good questions that I have never, you know, I've never really heard before. I think, you know, I when you first said about what color are you, I think of the old mood rings that everybody used to wear, right? Right, and go, ooh, look, I'm this color. You know, and then there's that sense where there are days where I know when I go to put clothes on, I'm definitely drawn. Like there was once upon a time in my life, right, when I was in my 20s and career oriented, everything was kind of like, you know, black or navy, you know, business.
Yeah. I was talking about how powerful art is. This last year, a very good friend of mine was killed in an accident, and it took us all by shock and surprise. There was a group of us that would meet, and my friend was one who would meet in this group, and she was just a beautiful person. I had created these dragonflies. They're ceramic, and they're made out of clay, and they're kiln fired twice. And it really struck me how the dragonfly, because it is birthed in the water, it lives in the water for anywhere from a couple months to a couple years, depending on the type it is, in a nymph stage. And then it climbs up out of the water and begins to learn to breathe air. And then it, from the back of its neck is a little crack in this nymph casing, and it breaks out of this shell and it has wings, and then it learns to fly. I just thought that was the most incredible transformational story. And so I gave all of my friends in this group dragonflies in memory of our dear friend. And we all wore them. And on the day of her celebration of life, we were all wearing them. And they have a little place in the middle, a little portal of connection that you can put your thumb there. And, you know, they just brought us, sorry, they just brought us such comfort in remembering and having a visible, tangible expression that our dear one, like the dragonfly, transformed into another realm, into another space and another form. And, you know, art has a way of doing that. It has a way of inspiring us and helping us. Different times I'd see people wearing their dragonflies. When they were really missing our friend, they'd be wearing their dragonflies, and it was just a tangible way of remembering a beautiful artist. Art also has a way of opening ourselves to a lot of the stories that could be inside of us. Shall I share another story? Did you have any questions?
Yeah, no, I was just like, when you're talking about your friend passing, it just made me realize too, as most, you know, so many people know that like Louise Hay passed
Yes.
yesterday at 90. And, you know, I feel like it wasn't about wearing a dragonfly, but it was like her work, You Can Heal Your Life, you know, that book, it's still here. So to me,
Yes.
like, Louise's words are here, and they're always here. And, you know, I'm honored that she had a part in my life and this whole healing journey, that now we're just continuing, you know, the movement of everybody healing.
Yes. Yes. And it's just, it's wonderful because they leave a very important part of themselves behind.
Yeah.
And artists do that. They leave an important part. The creatives do that. They leave an important part of themselves behind to be able to read and explore and understand and enjoy, even if you weren't alive when they were alive. There's many artists that I so love, and I wasn't even, of course I wasn't born when they were on the earth, but because of their work it remains.
Have you ever seen like the Mona Lisa?
Yes.
You know, and it's true, right? Her eyes follow you, right? Like, it's like, you know, the detail on some of those things that were done. What was that done? How many hundreds of years ago? But, you know, so obviously there's architecture and there's, you know, sculpture. There's all kinds of creative avenues that we leave a legacy. And
Yes.
in some cases, we don't even recognize what that legacy is until after the artist has departed. And then we go, oh, that was such an amazing creation.
No, I know it. It's really, wow. It's just beyond my words. It is beyond my words. But I wanted to talk just briefly about how art, our intuitive art that comes out, can really help us put together parts of our lives too. I said in the void, I don't know if I was heard or you were heard, but I was talking a little bit about one of my earliest memories as a very small child was wondering what it would be like not to be born yet. And then as I was growing up, I always would write poetry. I would always write about Joshua and Caleb, or my missing one, or this or that, but always have this yearning for someone that I dearly loved that was not with me, who was a part of me. And then when I got older, I kind of set that aside, and maybe I just got used to feeling that way. But then when I was in my 40s, I was teaching a class, and in this, it's kind of a meditative thing. What you do is you take an ink block and you put printer's ink, and you have a roller, and you roll it out. Then you put a piece of just blank white paper down, and you rub over it with your hands. And it's a great meditation. And, you know, people come up with what comes out is just this wonderful reflection of black and white types of things. Well, this is what came out for me. Let me see if you can see this.
Well, it looks to me like there's symmetry there. And I would say, if I know the story, but I would go like, looks like something from utero.
And that's exactly right. But when I saw this, I was just expecting to see shapes from hands. And when I saw this, I was teaching the class and I put all these things up on the board and I looked and I thought, oh, I mean, I was just like dumbfounded. And so I quickly moved from mine over into some of the other people's who were there. I went home and I just kept looking at this. Mm-hmm. And then I had a breathing type of practice where I was, I did some deep breathing with a group of people, and mm-hmm. I was in the womb and I went through different fears and there was somebody else with me, but that somebody else died. And then there was this great fear of being taken away. And as I put it all together, I realized I was a twin. And in the womb, you know, this was, now I'm 64 years old. So this was before they had, you know, ultrasound and all that type of thing. They didn't realize I was still in there. And the doctor wanted to do some type of a DNC. And that's where that great fear came of just being swept away. Nobody in my family had ever talked to me about this. That next summer, we were all gathered, and my mother, who was older, quite elderly, I said to her, I said, was I ever a twin? Or was I a twin? And she looked at me and she began to cry. And she said, who told you that? You weren't ever supposed to know. And I brought out this picture and I said, I created this picture. And I started to put pieces together. And she just cried and cried. And she said, you know, anyhow, she and my father had decided not to tell me because they thought it would make me too sad. And I said, I've been sad all my life, looking for my twin. And so what happened as a result of that was I began to, I had a dream that night. And in the dream, my twin was half painted, and I picked up a paintbrush and I painted the rest of him. And then I began to realize, because I would always have these dreams, and in the dream was this man who was very much like me. He felt very much like me, like we knew each other very, very well. And then I realized that was my twin. So I began to put all these pieces together in my life as a result of that painting. Right. Because had I not done that painting and put this all together, my mother would have gone to her grave with the secret that I was a twin. So,
well, I think that's very powerful, and it's a way to just demonstrate when you're asking yourself questions, right? And you're feeling these things and you're still searching for the answer. The answer does come, right? And it's just in that timing. So this beautiful picture, and then the story that unfolds, and the emotion that your mother probably had been carrying too, of protecting you from that, but yet you were still experiencing it. I think that's a good lesson for all of us when we just feel like, when there's things that you feel, you feel that you're missing. It's like to get in touch with that now, right? To really do your best to get in touch with it as you can now, in as you say, asking yourself questions about what sense you are or what sound you like, and start to pick up and notice, what are you drawn to? Is it crayons? Is it paint? Is it clay? And get yourself in creative mode.
Yes. One thing that's really a wonderful practice too, that oftentimes people think is just for children, is to do finger painting.
Yes.
And to, as adults, to, you know, spread out paper. And you can get finger paints now that are just so easy and so whatever. I mean, they even make like pudding flavored finger paints. It's just it's out there. But to put, you know, your entire hand, your entire being into it, and to just be able to feel the paint, put the paint on your fingers. And for people that don't like to get their hands wet or yucked up, you can use plastic gloves. But I think that not using the plastic gloves is by far the very best. But it's that outward expression is so good for us. It's so good just to be able to release and to, you know, you can use the finger painting, you know, hang it up on your wall, look at it. You can use it for wrapping paper, or, you know, but I would suggest that any artwork that people do, to keep it and then come back and look at it the next day with new eyes. So oftentimes we are our own worst critic. And so our critical self wants to say, oh, that's not very good, or who would like that, or whatever. And I would just like to encourage you to come back with fresh eyes the next day and take a new look at it.
Yeah. And I used to, with my kids, because I just felt like there's this creative spirit, and they, their paintings and their canvases or whatever they were always around the house. Like I was using them and people would say, wow, you're hanging up your child's painting over the sofa. And I'm like, well, I would rather have their artwork, right?
Yes.
Than somebody else's, because it's their creative spirit in my house. And there were many people that just had never thought about really honoring their children in that way. It's like, oh, it's little, it's a stage. But I already knew, I guess, that their stuff, from my perspective, was better than anything that I had created. And they have since taught me, say, oh, Mom, you're far more creative than you think. Like, just go and paint. And it's true. It's like you start to let go of that, as you say, whether it's putting the finger paints in or taking the brush and just starting without judgment.
Yes.
Expressing. And who is to say how great that expression is? But it is definitely a creative release.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I love that, without judgment, because, you know, how many times have people started, they've gotten excited about doing some kind of a painting or a drawing or something, and then they create it and look down at it and they think, oh, this isn't, and then the comparing critic jumps in, or they had an idea that it's supposed to be instantly incredible. But the reality is, people who do art, they do it over and over and over again. Very rarely is there somebody who comes along and the first time it's just magnificent. That is that is an exception rather than the rule. And so in doing art, like any other process, the more you do it, the better you get. Your eyes develop to be able to see, your hand and eye coordination, you begin to understand what it is that you like. So I just like to encourage everybody to lose that old paradigm of instantly it coming out to be this phenomenal piece that everybody's going to ooh and ah over. Because in the first place, everybody's not going to ooh and ah over anything you do. There's always going to be people who have a different sense of taste, and maybe they like it, maybe they don't. But honoring ourselves is so vital.
Yeah, and that one about different tastes. I mean, you just have to look at, you know, whether it is Michelangelo or Monet or Van Gogh. I mean, those are three celebrated artists,
Right.
And they're entirely different in how they paint. So you can be a fan of one and not of the other. You can respect their work, but it's not your taste. And so just finding what makes you feel good and allowing yourself to, as I said, just create, be inspired by what comes through you. It's very healing, and you're able to express it outside.
Yes. And, you know, I love that you would take your children's paintings and put them up because they were heard. And that's one thing that I think that in our generation, that didn't necessarily happen so much. I think that, of course, people are much more evolved now than they were back then, but that always happens over time because, you know, people stand on the shoulders of those who went before them, and they, you know, they learn and they grow, and then, you know, so the next generation and the generation after that. My little grandson, one of my little grandsons, has a canvas or an easel in the front room, in the living room, you know, and he can just go paint whenever he wants. And now his little brother, who's not quite a year, is starting to go up and scribble on the easel. And my another grandson is encouraged to do art. They were here visiting, and he went over and he began to play on the big powwow drum that I had. And I said, oh, Jack, that drum likes to be played pretty loud. Well, he just lit up and began to play, and his parents joined in on some of the different instruments I had. And we just had a blast, but there was such a freedom there. Then as a child, I didn't have that freedom at all because it was always, it has to be contained in this small place. This picture has to just look like this. The colors have to be this. But now there's more of an understanding. I think a lot of that has to do with consciousness and an expansion of consciousness in our world today.
Yeah, and most definitely. And one of the things the kids taught me was they would then look at their artwork as the years would progress, and they'd say, I don't like that. That's not me anymore. And I'd be like, but you did it, you know, with this. And they're like, no, I want to paint over it. I want to do it. And I'd be like, we would do that with photos too. We're probably one of the only families that they would look at, you know, we got rid of so many photos because they're like, no, don't like it. Not me. I'm older, whatever.
Wow.
But yeah, as a mother, that those things of a mother role and the expectations of how a family unit, and you're supposed to keep all these magical moments.
Yes.
They were through with them. in a lot of cases. And it was like, nope, they take the canvas and it hung for maybe a couple of years, and then it was like paint over white and we're going to paint again.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful to be able to grow past and say, okay, that was then, now who am I today?
Yeah.
You know, that's awesome. You taught them to really keep growing and moving. Wow.
Well, I think I did more of letting them be connected and learning to let go of my expectations, just like we're talking about art, right? So being a parent is a creative expression.
Yes.
And
yes.
So learning to let go and trust that as I believe that your inner guidance always knows what's best for you. And that becomes that, again, that critic would say, oh no, you're a mother, you're supposed to know what's best. But ultimately they're children of the universe. And I believe their inner guidance knows what's best. And my job is to get out of the way and let them be.
Yes, yes. One of the things that I have found with my art now, in this season of my life, is that I always say to people, all the ages inside of me, meaning, you know, there's still that little child, there's still that teenager, there's still that young, you know, 20-something-year-old, there's the 30-year-old, there's, you know, but all the ages inside of me. And there's times when I will, in my art, I will actually have a type of conversation between a younger me and an older me. And that's really a wonderful type of a thing. It's like storytelling in pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm describing this well enough, but it's like storytelling in pictures, and to be able to depict a childlikeness, there's an innocence, and then an older side that maybe there's a little bit of wisdom there, but then there's the wisdom of, you know, the child. And one of the things in art, I make one-of-a-kind books, and some of the books are like 4 feet tall, and you know, they're like collages, or they're made out of clay, or they're, you know, just a variety of different types of art books. And in one of the books, there's a depiction, there's a watercolor, and there's a woman with white hair. She's wearing a long dress, and she's a wise woman who would come in the dreams of this younger one. I wrote this book when I was younger, and I didn't know who this wise lady was.
You!
It's me. But in my art, I knew. But in my mind, I didn't have any idea.
See, and that to me gives me like the little goosebump, because it's about that inner and the outer expression. And the inner really is that we are so connected with everything. Yes. So presence is all in that one moment. And yet it's like having a dream, and you go, there's so many levels of a dream. So when you're actually creating something, you may still look at it as this creation at this moment, but it could have many stories to tell over the lifetime.
Yes, yes. And it's like the fluid stories, because they're all within this big cauldron or this big pot, but there's so many different stories, and they change and they change form. Like as a younger, you know, when I would have these dreams and I'd look at this woman with her wisdom, and I think, oh, and I remember she would, you know, in certain stories, she would come along. If I was in trouble, she'd come along and she'd pick me up and put me on her horse behind her, and we'd ride off. And I have drawings of that. And I just thought, oh, and she would wear jewelry that I really love, but I never had the nerve to wear. And, you know, so, but in my art, I would see this, but I didn't recognize it until later on.
Right.
So
you were the wise Wonder Woman for your little self.
For my little self, but I didn't even understand that, but my art reflected it.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible that you've had so much come out of you from the inner to the outer. And I guess, so you're encouraging that all of us can have those experiences, right?
Yes, I am. And I think that it's so powerful. And I think that it's just, I mean, I have a book that I wrote that's called Metaphorically Yours, and it's talking about our inner stories. And I wrote it 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. But my stories are more real now than they were 15 years ago. I look at this and I just think, oh my gosh, it's phenomenal to me. I know I shouldn't be surprised, but I always am.
But it is still surprising, you know. It's just like I said when I went and I found today there's the 5 cabins, and I said to my daughter, they have 5, and she says, of course they do. That's why we're here.
And yet we're sitting here going, it's a combination between duh and oh my God.
Yeah. So is there something you would encourage everybody to do this week?
I would encourage people to pick up, whether it be colored pencils, markers. We all have things around our house. You could even go outside and pick up some dirt and write on the sidewalk. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything special, but, or chalk, or pick up something and just do an expression of how you're feeling right now. See what comes out on the paper, on the sidewalk, I mean, I'm not saying you should go out and spend hundreds of dollars on art materials. I'm just saying take something that's very easy. And if you're feeling uptight about it, one of the practices that I have put into my life, my kids have heard it forever, but I always, when I first came to the desert and I wanted to plant a backyard, but it was so hot, I killed so many plants because I didn't know what it was like coming from Michigan, what it was like to live in the desert. So I said, finally, I was so terrified I'd just do it all wrong. I said, okay, this is the practice yard. And I began to put together a backyard, which of course, as it is now, only it's over a series of years. So I would encourage all of you to put together a practice piece of art. This one doesn't really count. This is a practice one.
Right.
When you're done with it, if you don't like it, it's not going to go on the wall. It's not going to be kept. Nobody's going to hold you accountable. It's your practice piece. And that relieves that performance pressure that we talked about last week. Because I think we all have grown up with this amount of performance pressure that, oh, everything has to be perfect or it has to look a certain way. So have fun with it. Just let it flow. Let it come out. Write an expression in color, or maybe you want to use torn up pieces of paper and glue. Write an expression of how you are today. How am I doing today?
Right.
And it doesn't have to make any sense to anybody but yourself.
That's so beautiful. And it just, the idea to me came to like when you were at the beach, because I was at the beach earlier and I made a sand angel instead of a, snowy, right? But sand castles when you were kids. Most of you did something like that and you knew that the water was just going to wash them away.
Yes.
Buddhist monks will make mandalas and they'll make beautiful mandalas and then the ocean tide will just come in and wash them, to teach them about impermanence. So it's the same idea that you go just create non-attachment. It's your practice, practice. And then when you're ready to keep it, you can keep it and hang it on the wall or display it on your table. It
removes that fear. It removes all that junk that keeps us from just expressing. So.
Yeah. Okay. So we're we can take pictures if we wanted to, but since we're just practicing, there's no pressure here. But you can tell us that you did something, that you were inspired to just take a step forward in your creative process, because we would love to hear from you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have access to Play-Doh or anything like that, or clay, that also counts. It doesn't have to be, a linear type of thing. It could be a 3D thing. You could put popsicle sticks together. You could take twigs and leaves and grass and create a little hobbit home. You could do whatever you want.
And if they wanted, because you do like consultations and things by virtually also, right? Just as we're talking here. People can get in touch with you how, Annie?
They can I can put I can put an email address. They could reach me through there. They can go through my Facebook art page and contact me there. They can message me. So
the Facebook art page, and then they can go to your Facebook page and they can contact you from there.
That'd be great. That would be wonderful, because I love doing this. And I think that, somebody once told me, they said, oh, well, you just can't transmit the energy over the internet. And I said, oh, yes, you can. Because, it's amazing. Consciousness has no little boxes to live in. It's flowing out. So I would love to hear from people. That would be awesome.
So we're going to leave you with that. Please get in contact. Let us know what's going on for you as we're continuing to create. And we look forward to seeing you next week on The Creative Breath. As always, it's a pleasure, Annie. Mwah! I love you.
I love you too. This is wonderful. Bye now.
Bye.